It's live. What time is it? Everything's 6:00. Post was not going to fall over. Oh, that's fine. But Katelynn and I
Everybody?
I think so.
Yeah.
Got a piece of paper?
I'm leaving for a big chunk of it, but I'll be back. I'll be back.
And I feel like everyone's
Yeah.
Says green, that's good.
Yeah.
All right, so just because I'm going to forget, this is not introduction. We're not streaming to 1,000 people right now. We are actually, but 6 maybe. This is not secure. So if you just, it could be a disaster along the way somewhere, but it will be a good disaster to remember the day the mic fell. Okay, is it on? So just be, it's on, is the sound on? Okay. No.
Oh, that's
Okay,
nice.
that's better. All right, so just remember that. No, no. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So just, I'm just showing the range to our graduates here. Okay. Why do I get myself in these situations? I actually, for those that know me, I actually wrote something down, which probably means it's going to be disastrous. So I might go off script here, but it helps me since I often don't do a good welcome. So can we start again? All right, you're on. Welcome to the MFA class of 2025 graduating reading. All right, graduate reading. Brand. Yes.
Tell us.
Okay.
Tell us, Mike.
The guns. Okay. But it's good. It's good. Not sure about the guns. All right. I'm Mike Horner. I remember to introduce myself. I'm the director, if you can believe it, of this MMA program. All right. And I have been director since these 5 wonderful graduates have come into the program. So this is sort of my, that doesn't make sense. All right, stay to the script, Michael. It's not my graduation, but it sort of is. It feels like my graduation. This is always a really happy night as we celebrate and congratulate our new graduates. We got Bob, Ben, Meilyn, I don't have my glasses on. All right, Jake is there, and Katelynn. Okay, but it's also kind of sad because you guys are leaving. I know some of you are staying around, but it's always different, and so it's a celebration, but also kind of I'll try not to cry. So 3 years, and I know I get negative sometimes, and I continue to do that. But what you guys have achieved, and again, this is maybe more for the families. It's not easy. Right? I don't think your families, they've probably seen you and talked to you. It's not easy what they're doing and what they've done. It's not, and especially in writing program, it's not just writing papers and turning them in and getting grades. I mean, they've put themselves out there. You go into this thing called workshop, and you put yourself out there, and then you have somewhere between 4 to 12 people tell you basically, or what you hear is that you suck. All right? And I believe we're really a supportive program, so I'm hoping no one says that you suck, but that's what you hear, because it's just like you're giving them your baby, and they're all saying, it's like they have different reactions. And sometimes it's 12 people that have the reactions you don't want, sometimes it's half. Sometimes everyone has a completely different reaction and you don't even know what to do. And it's just not easy. Right? It's a whole different way of school where you're putting yourself in front of your peers, putting your work, your artistic self out in front of everyone, and hearing what they have to say about it. And it's not easy. Other things that you've done that haven't been easy is you guys have been instrumental in this whole new teaching, this co-requisite. You were sort of the guinea pigs on this, and you did wonderfully. It's really affecting, I believe, our 101 students and getting through and making helping us be a better program and helping McNeese keep our college students here and helping. I don't have this part of the speech, that's why I'm falling apart. But it's so important what you do, right? And you guys have done that. And the hardest thing about this is that they have been teaching with their fellow graduate students in the classroom with them, right? And so when you're a new teacher, and even when you're a teacher that's been doing this for 25 years, you mess up some days, and students often don't know that you mess up, but your grad student person that's watching you does know that you mess up. So there's no hiding from anything, and that's hard. I mean, that's really hard. So thank you for, again, working with us on that and setting the foundation for not just the artistic endeavor, but the teaching endeavor that we ask you to do, and you do a lot of teaching. All right, I'm going to cut. There's a positive part coming up. All right. I see Joyce. All right. But in all this, you have had the strength to carry on, and most importantly, create something, words and sentences, stories and novels. I hope there have been joys. We have an outstanding, wonderful group right now. I mean, really, it's I'm sorry if any alumni are here, but it really is the best group ever. That's not a good way to get donations, is it? But it's just been just a wonderful experience. I'm so lucky, and I think all the faculty, we know are so lucky. Being a writer doesn't even get any easier. Okay, get back to negative. That was the joyful part. All right. So just again, this is my speech every year. Just a reminder is that writing never gets easy. So you're graduating. You've produced really good writing, right? We've seen it. 4 novels and a collection of short stories, right, that you guys have produced, but it's always hard, okay? And this program, again, I think the big thing about this program is that it's a hard program. It asks a lot of you, and it recreates life after you graduate, and that you just have to remember sometimes when it's not coming together, the writing's not working, that you can do this, okay? You produce something when all these things were pulling you in all different directions, and you can still do that. It's always important. And when you don't feel like you can do it, that's when you reach out to your cohort, your classmates, okay? They're always gonna be there, I hope, for you, all right? They should be there for you, and you guys should be there for each other, because that's what gets you through writing, is this collective group to root for you, sometimes tell you things that you don't want to hear, but they're there. And so remember, call on your classmates. And I think that was kind of positive, right? That was any kind of positive. Good. All right. Good. All right. All right. That was longer than I thought. So, Bob.
Yes.
You are the first reader.
That's it.
This is shorter. I'm going to keep reading. All right. I was going back over my write-ups for Bob's work over the years. I can say this one thing: Bob is a master of the spoken word. Maybe not the words we speak, but the words we speak behind the words we speak. He is a maximal minimalist. He gets all the bells and whistles and appendices. I get that jab in there, and uses them just right. I give you that. There are monologue pyrotechnics like I've never seen before, and he pulls it off time and time again. But really what astounds me about Bob's work is there is a deep, deep emotional core, a sadness that even at its most humorous, most absurd, there is an honesty that frames all of this, and a deep core of sadness that holds it all together in a beautiful, messy glue. Maybe it isn't honesty, but frankness. Maybe it isn't humor, but despair. Even if your prose seems at times to be beating around the bush, like the appendices, it isn't. It's just uneven pull of gravity of the uneven pull of the gravity of sadness. I knew that wasn't going to sound good. The uneven pull of the gravity of sadness in this world, being frank by not being frank. Okay. So here's Bob.
Thank you, Mike. That was sad. Family and friends, students who, none of whom actually showed up because they're all dirty fucking liars. But I was going to thank them, and especially my thesis committee, Dr. Costello, Dr. Critch, Michael Robbins, and especially Michael Warner. So thank you. So I'm going to read from my novel. It's out of order. So we're gonna start with chapter 51, which is in the middle, and then we're gonna skip to most of the prologue, which is actually at the end. So this is just a quick chapter to give you a taste, which is referenced later. So chapter 51, the novel is called Weird Panic. Chapter 51. I don't know why we choose the people we choose to love us. It probably has something to do with trying to make up for the love we didn't get when we wanted it most. Like little chipmunks hunting for our misplaced acorns, we think we know just where we can find it, just where we lost it, right around here, or maybe it was just over there. It would be sweet, really, if it wasn't tragic, but maybe that makes it sweeter. One night after fishing, Teddy Backle and I sat at the end of the dock getting high, but the sad kind. We had some popcorn, and despite warnings from Teddy Backle, I had started naming the individual popcorns as I ate them. You should stop naming the individual popcorns as you eat them, Teddy Backle said. That's going to make you too sad. Naming the individual popcorns is what's preventing me from being sadder, I told Teddy Backle. Well, Teddy Backle said, may you be inspired by their valiant sacrifice. So now we're going to skip ahead to the prologue, which is actually, the prologue's behind. But, and so this is a bit about the narrator and his sister, his little sister, Amelia. Amelia would tell his story sometimes about the newborn diaper surprise. The newborn diaper surprise was a baby doll that peed or something like that, and you could wash its diapers or something like that with the diaper surprise center accompaniment. She really wanted one, and she finally got one from a garage sale. We were a huge garage sale family, but it was missing the diaper surprise center. But this is how Amelia would tell the story about the newborn diaper surprise. And I was never sure how much of it she convinced herself was true and how much of it she knew never happened, because she would tell it so convincingly and no one ever dared call her on it, especially because she'd have the whole room laughing. It was one of our favorite Amelia stories. It starts with her finally getting a newborn diaper surprise and how happy she was, just overjoyed. Couldn't stop smiling all week. And that weekend, after she gets it, she invites over some of her first grade friends for a sleepover to show off the newborn diaper surprise. She had finally something to show off. And one of her friends, this prissy little bitch, she says, where's the newborn diaper surprise center? What are you, poor? But Amelia didn't even really know about the diaper surprise center, or she had forgotten about it, considering how happy she was just to have the doll. And the doll just peed on things. But Amelia didn't really know that either, I don't think. So the way Amelia tells the story is that to hide her embarrassment about the missing diaper surprise center, she had to secretly shit on the doll and act like the doll did it, which isn't even how the doll ever worked. But she says it made sense at the time. No one was fooled because she obviously didn't have the diaper surprise center and the doll didn't even work that way. It was just a pee doll. So Amelia secretly shits on the doll, which this part is true. But the way Amelia tells the story is that everybody just started secretly shitting on things and blaming the doll for it, to cover for it. So new poops just started popping up. A turd on the remote, a turd on the bookshelf. And every time Amelia says after some random kid took a shit on something, they yell out, oh no, look where the newborn diaper surprise baby got you now. Amelia really plays that part up. All these little kids just shitting around the living room. And in Amelia's story, eventually, the entire living room was just like poop everywhere. The cost of cleanup became many times over the price of a new newborn diaper surprise, complete with the diaper surprise center accompaniment. But it was way too late for that once all the shitting started. And in Amelia's story, the scene devolves into a poop slinging fight, and once everyone's exhausted, it ends with an ice cream social, and someone says, and this is the part that cracks her up the most, the part that she really lays on thick for the most, someone says, uh-oh, looks like we only have chocolate ice cream left, and I can't tell where the ice cream tub ends and the living room begins. And in Amelia's version, everyone just laughs. And on Monday, her first grade friends tell everyone at school that it was the best sleepover ever, but they can't even talk about it more than that. But the real story is that my little sister, who was so excited for her first real big sleepover to have her own friends come over, she got so nervous that she panic pooped on a doll, and then all the kids had to go home early. And even in high school, sometimes someone would say to her, hey, aren't you the kid who pooped on that doll that one time? And we never talked about it, not even that night, except for later, when Amelia would tell her version of this story, and usually it was when we were just a little drunk, and we'd laugh, and those nights really were the best sleepovers ever. Later, into adulthood, Amelia and I connected less as siblings and more as strange companions on a shared journey who happened to have a shared history, which is to say, as friends. Though I'm not sure either of us entirely knew how to be one, though we both needed more of them. Regardless, Amelia's who convinced me to become an alcoholic. I think the initial suggestion was aspirational, so she might have on-demand access to a drinking buddy. She drank rarely, but when the time would come, her request was always urgently delivered. And though I was drunk when I first agreed to what seemed an obviously delightful life choice in the moment, she held me to our agreement the following day. In that bleary-eyed morning of sobriety, I found myself protesting that I didn't have the constitution for alcoholism, that I'd much prefer a little water every now and again, that my tender body would reject this medicine, however well-intentioned, that she diagnosed my problem as a low tolerance and simply prescribed more drinking. Mike told me I couldn't bring my high life up here. You have to teach your body what's good for it, she'd said. Visualize yourself becoming the best drunk you can be, the drunk I know you are inside. And maybe since I had been long starved for anyone offering that level of confidence in my abilities at anything, and maybe since I was temporarily out of work, and maybe since we had a new small inheritance, I committed myself to the notion as a matter of duty, believing that maybe our continued kinship depended upon whatever might be found at the bottom of the bottle, and the drinking up was actually more a process of drinking through, that at the end of whatever this would become lay something more than we might presently be able to imagine. And also I was tired of feeling things, and I was happy for the permission to stop feeling things, which I think she felt too. I think she thought she was helping us both. We started with the usual potent potables, gin and scotch and rye and tequila, but never vodka, because vodka, according to Amelia, was too basic, and my distinctive drunken lifestyle required a stamp, a brand, to differentiate and announce an intentional quality. She would not have a wino or a bargain basement drunkard as a brother. So we continued into soju and shoju and absinthe, sambuca and mezcal and calvados, anything that might announce with discernment that this, whatever this was an intentional act. We shopped the way some people read poetry or go to gallery openings, willing to drink 1,000 frogs to find the one that sings the soul. Think debutante, not dilettante, she'd say, as we strolled the liquor aisles. We were out not to accumulate, but to imbibe, to take in deeply, driven by the idea that the next thing, the one just beyond, might be what completes our lonely lives, and we dare not miss it. Eventually, we stumbled upon aguardiente, which is how we landed on going to Ecuador to drink it from the source in the Andes. What little bit we inherited came from the sale of our parents' house, the mortgage of which, by some miracle, had been mostly paid off. We split it 4 ways, me and Amelia and our 2 other siblings, who had mostly stopped replying to our text chain after they had flown back to their own homes and families and glossy lives. Admittedly, the texts we received were bright and supportive, while the texts we sent had taken on an unappreciated gallows humor. Even when I did write out impassioned messages about how much we loved them all, how we missed them, how I wanted to embrace them forever, and even when I had Amelia confirm they made sense before sending, with her making corrections and adding emojis, the next day the messages quite often included missing words and typos. One might read something like this, for example. I live, all 100, the best, ads, winky face. It was completely inexplicable. The new owners had agreed to let us, me and Amelia, live in our house after closing, at least until their own sale went through, on the pretext that we'd appreciate the time to clean out everything and move things into storage. Effectively, we became squatters in our childhood home. But instead of cleaning things out, we left them where they rightfully belonged, knowing we'd never be able to keep any of it in storage and wondering what good it would do to pretend. Better to cut the cord early, we said, and held nightly rituals to say goodbye. The aguardiente, maybe, in retrospect, was only a pretext, too, but I can't say for sure. We were getting older, but not so much older that we couldn't remember how, in only slightly younger days, we had longed to go somewhere, anywhere, where we could be young and happy. So convinced were we that the better part of our youth would be surely spent somewhere else that we never, in fact, did much about it. We rested assuredly that this change would come naturally. We used the word frolic quite a bit. There had been lots of talks about frolicking, visions of frolicking. We had seen so many others frolicking, so why never us? When would be our turn to frolic? According to aguardiente, our time was now. Ecuador was still cheap, and maybe we could teach English if we had to, and our childhood home would be taken soon, which meant we had no home. So in the moment, the aguardiente wasn't a pretext or just a sign. It was a big fucking billboard with flashing arrows and neon lights. Skip ahead a little bit. In preparation for our trip, or I guess moving, Amelia shaved her head. She wanted to donate her hair before we left, she said, because it would grow back. And why would she be so committed to vanities like hair? She only grew her hair out in the first place because it was easier than getting it cut. Except then she had to maintain it. And she was worried about ticks. In her mind, I think we were moving to the jungle. But it's your hair, I said. It's not a vanity. It's your hair. It's part of you. She looked me square in the eye, bringing it all back into a tight pony and snipped. She had never done it before, though, and without thinking, she snipped the wrong side. That side easier to snip, the side farther away from her head, like a cartoon character sawing the wrong side of a branch. A mess of it fell to the ground, and any drink we mixed that night we called a hair the dog, which I guess meant Amelia was the dog. Eventually, we found ourselves sitting on the kitchen floor, arguing about pizza toppings for a pizza that never arrived. I don't know what I want, she said. I just know it's not here. I said it seemed like there must be a word for that feeling in German for not getting something you aren't even sure you want, which set her off. They want us to have just enough to lose, she said, and never any more. They want us to have something to work for, to make us think we can get it, but we'll never get it. She was quite jovial, sitting on the floor with her fucked up hair, and had started eating peanut butter out of a jar with her hands, which she seemed quite tickled about. She went on about what she called the dissonant layers of our lives and the accelerating pressure to blend them, to smooth our multitudes into a thick, consistent slurry, into an inoffensive, self-satisfied curtailment of curiosity, of joy, of the full, plump, anachronistic elements of ourselves. This is trauma, she said, holding up the jar. Terrible at first, but you learn to like it because it just becomes part of who you are, and then you end up smearing it on everything you love. She flicked a glob of it at me. I got 3 more minutes. One night, we watched a nature documentary about training a dog sled team. They had wooden containers filled with walrus meat, which they called equinox. Supposedly, it tasted like a fishy horse covered in blue cheese. The voiceover made alarming claims about changing weather patterns, which Amelia keyed into. She started listing off recently learned weather terms with deep, long baritone enunciations, as if to tell me the sky would fall almost momentarily and we might as well leave since we had no other place to be. Wet bulb, she said. Atmospheric river. Look, I said, we don't have the money yet, we're close, but we will. Once we get there, heat dome, bomb cyclone. We have to get there, and then we have to live there, and we still need money to live there, and derecho, thunder, snow, dry lightning. And if we're going to be on the street, I'd rather be on the street here, where we at least know polar vortex, red flag warning. By the time I finally looked up the tickets, it turns out they were only $150 one way if we left the next morning. So I booked them. Of course, I overslept. By the time I woke, there was no way I could make the flight. What's more, Amelia and my passport were missing. I found the passport soon enough, hidden in the microwave, which we only used for popcorn on movie nights, which would have started a few hours after I finally rolled out of bed. Tucked into the passport was a handmade card, and inside the card was the following handwritten note. Dear brother, what if our lives are like a book that's all just the middle? Everyone's endings are someone else's middles, so there's got to be someone somewhere that their life is all just the middle. And maybe we're them. Maybe we're the middles. Maybe we exist to be in between, which means we can be anything. We can do anything because we're the middles. Because we're the middles, we get to fail right. We get to fail wrong. We get to fail part-time, fail for fun. Fail because we can, fail because we can't. Fail when we feel the whole world's weight crushing us and decide not to carry it. Fail when we try to carry it and it crushes us anyway. Fail because we aren't strong as we thought. Fail because it makes us feel good. Fail because it makes us feel failure. Fail because it's better than not failing. We're free to just try to fail forever. And maybe we fail at that too.
In a dark room, a pin light shines as bright as a supernova. I love you, and I don't want you to be alone. P.S. I already named all the popcorns for you. I did not look for her, but neither did I know how to find her. She never answered messages, so eventually I stopped sending them. I think she just wanted to give us both an ending. I think she thought we were both owed at least that much. Thank you, that's my time.
That was fantastic, Bob. I know it's not anchored. Okay. I'm Lynn Watson. I teach fiction in the MFA program here, and I'm delighted to see everybody tonight. I'm going to start this reading with the same exact phrase I used 6 weeks ago, the last time I introduced a reading, and I'm going to say, some of you may know that I'm a fan of very terrible reality television. In that vein, I'm going to introduce some of our graduates tonight with taglines from what I'm calling the real MFAers of McNeese State. And first up, we've got Jake Snyder. I'm honored to introduce him. He is one of the kindest and funniest people that I know. He's an absolute bright light in this program and in this world. We just had so much fun this past semester playing pranks, working on his thesis, playing pranks, working on his thesis. Jake's writing is just as fun as Jake is. I love seeing that bright light emerge in the characters that he puts on the page. He somehow infuses his own brand of earnestness and curiosity into his work, balancing serious subjects with humor. With apologies to all the other graduates, Jake is the only person who gets a prize tonight. Jake, before I read your tagline, I present to you. I'll leave it up here for you. And so Jake's tagline tonight is, character is not what you have, it's who you are. Please welcome Jake Snyder.
So I seem to always follow Bob after every meeting I've ever had, who sets the bar very high with engaging the audience. So thank you, Bob. All right, I'm going to read a little bit from my novel called Children of the Trials. It's a sci-fi piece. So I'm going to read the prologue and I'm going to read chapter 1. All right, so prologue. Notice from the Chris Department of Defense. As the threat of attacks carried out by the planet Kryton increases, all children and young adults of Krith, aged 9 through 22, are required to fulfill duties as soldiers. We will no longer use those over the age of 22 as a result of the unpredictable nature of the Lowry gene. A new government office has been created to oversee this training. The superiors are to be treated with the same respect as the other leaders of Krith. The Cree people are not to be underestimated. Please report anything suspicious to the main office at the Department of Defense. Please stay tuned for more information. All right, chapter 1. 102 years after the Battle of the Cree. Rayla's fist was covered in blood. She had smashed the face of the man blocking her path to the temple in front of her, and behind her 2 bodies twisted and bent upwards, picking themselves up from the ground after suffering the same fate as the man. Rayla knew they'd come back eventually, but she thought she would have more time before the men were reanimated. She shook the blood off her hand and scanned her surroundings. She needed to find the safest way into the temple, which would lead to her passing the trial. She could climb the old tree that wrapped itself around the temple's front iron awning, but she risked running into the men stationed on the back rooftops. If they were to spot her, they would surely alert additional guards. And that would be if she could even cross the awning, as there was nothing in between the iron rods to step onto. The only other option she could think of was to run as fast as she could to the front steps, leading to the door that was unguarded, hoping that the men would not catch up to her before she could make it inside. This path seemed too easy, but she ignored that thought. She was tired and she wanted to get inside. As the warm wind whipped through her long red hair and the twin moons watched over her, Rayla could hear the waves crashing behind the temple. She often thought about that beach, thought about jumping in and feeling the water against her skin. She hadn't been in the water in years, but she couldn't think about that. She had to think about the issue at hand. Trials, focused specifically on guns, flying, team battles, and combat had been clear. This trial, however, was a bit harder, and it was only the first level. All trials had 5 levels, and this was the one that she'd spent the most time on. She couldn't discover the best way to pass and couldn't even find out what the purpose of the trial was. The men behind her began to gain speed, and the tall man began to reanimate as well. His left eye, a green one, was bulging out of the socket, and blood still trickled down his nose. She ran faster, mustering all her strength to take the last few steps needed to accomplish her goal. Stepping out from the shadows of the temple doorway, a large man with deep indentions on his hairless head threw out a fist, smashing into her nose and knocking her backwards. But she didn't let this cripple her. She stood up, intent on moving past him, and dodged another punch as she ignored the deep red blood that began to drip from her nose. She took a deep breath, breathing in the musty scent of the purple flowers hanging from the trees above her head. I can do this, she thought. The man still refused to budge. She stared into his eyes with her arms raised to block any potential attack towards her. He seemed to keep her waiting on purpose, letting her heart rate soar as she tried to figure out the best move to take. She felt the beating in her fingertips, felt it in her neck, felt it down to her toes. She instinctually reached for her gun but found the holster empty and instead activated the blade attached to her wrist. No guns in this trial. The blade, running the length of her hand, hummed with energy. It craved to be used to pierce the flesh, and the blink of an eye dug into his neck as she lunged at him. The man moved quick enough to dodge a fatal attack, but suffered from a small gash that started to drip blood down to his shoulder. In his attempt to move, Rayla had thrown her arm back towards him and swiped at his neck again. He turned back to her and wrapped his arm around her neck, squeezing every bit of air out of her. She couldn't fight back this time. The world around her turned dark, darker than the night sky above her, and her vision failed. Her ears began to ring. The man still wouldn't loosen his grip. He grunted and towered over her, watching and smiling. She could no longer defend herself. Was this what dying felt like? As quickly as he appeared, his body turned blue and faded away, followed by the other men. The tall man's frozen image lingered a little longer, a malfunction to the system that had been happening lately, but after a few seconds, he too disappeared. Rayla fell to the ground and her vision began to return. Although her pursuers could no longer affect her, their strength and power over her was real, as was the aftermath that she was forced to deal with. She took several big gulps of air and rubbed the crick in her neck before screaming at the empty space around her. She removed the blade from her wrist, threw it to the ground, and stomped her feet in the dirt. She thought about what her father would say, and she pinched herself for not thinking smarter during the trial. Rayla, that's the 3rd time this month that you failed to enter the temple. She could hear the voice echoing through the trees, and she hated it. The superior's low, raspy voice haunted her dreams. She couldn't even wake up and be thankful because her dreams had been mirroring reality. She pinched herself again, something she started doing a few weeks ago after failing her tests. That man, Rayla said, still catching her breath, keeps appearing from different areas, and just when I think I've figured him out, he changes tactics and I can't keep up. Well, that man is nothing compared to the real space pirates who steal from our planet. If you can't pass the simulation and move to the harder levels, then you won't stand a chance against the real ones. And remember, you have to pass. Rayla stood up and looked around, trying to find the superior. If she could look into her eyes, she might be able to tell whether the superior truly thought that she could move forward or not. They were strict, but usually small facial cues gave away what was really going on inside. Rayla learned from her older cousin that most of them were the same, all unable to truly mask anything. There was always something small to be seen. She wanted to see what the superior saw. She couldn't risk being among the few who couldn't pass. Why can't I see you? She asked. Other issues have prevented me from attending this trial in person. I am watching from above. She looked around at the temple grounds and swallowed hard, noticing a tingle in her throat, and then she swallowed again. She wanted to stay even after the trial was done for the day. She had become so familiar with the area, had become so acquainted with the purple glowing flowers on the trees, the sinuous curves of the iron above the temple. She wanted to sit on the sand behind the temple and feel it in her hands while watching the manda crabs poke out their tiny heads. But she knew she couldn't spend much time there once the trials were done. No one was allowed on the underlevels of the planet unattended, especially not if there weren't any trials scheduled. Years ago, civilians were allowed to schedule visits to the gardens and the beaches near the temple, but the government slowly began lowering the number of available slots until there were none left, and the scheduling program was terminated. After that, only trials were allowed to take place with constant supervision, and even then, no one was allowed to pass over the fences that surrounded the area. Before leaving, Rayla walked behind the temple and scanned the ground. She found no crabs this time, but she found a small shell with a spiral pattern on its back. She pocketed it and then rubbed the sand, feeling it in her hands. Although the middle levels where she lived had dirt and sand, it was artificial and and not quite the same as the real stuff on the surface of the planet. Her father worked for the company that fabricated it, and so she often heard what went into creating it. She took one last look at the water, noticing the tiny bubbles that formed from the sinkholes beneath the surface. When the tides moved, those sinkholes would become uncovered, but for now, the planet was concealing them. After a few moments, she turned around and headed back towards the ladder that would take her to a ship waiting to fly her up to the middle levels, where civilization thrived. It was the ship that would bring her back to her parents, and she'd have to tell them about failing the trials again. She wondered what they'd say, specifically her father. Last time she failed, they were worried about her, but her mother tried to hide it so that she could still be supportive of her. But that didn't stop her from eavesdropping and hearing the hushed conversation her father had had about her later that night. A conversation about her future, her role as a warrior, the potential attacks coming, and the inability of the adults to do anything about it because of the gene that rendered them useless in battle, a gene that would never be cured. That conversation, of course, led to her father pointing out that she was on the road to exile if she didn't start taking it seriously. She needed to give it all that she could, especially for him. Exile was not something to be taken lightly. The ladder to the landing platform had been built a century ago, and although she could see rust on some of the steps, she never worried about falling. She had made the climb plenty of times. As she began climbing, she turned to look below her, hoping to see more as she got higher. The trees blocked her vision from most angles, though, and if it wasn't the trees, it was the fog that covered the ground. Several large insects the size of her fingers buzzed around the tops of the trees, some perching on the leaves and watching her with beady eyes as she passed. K-flies with their tiny glittery wings hummed in harmony, and one landed on her shoulder. She looked up, miles above her, at the beams holding up the city. Waiting for her on the platform was her mentor Kai, and he watched her closely as she made her way up to his ship. Kai was 17, only 5 years older than her, and he had been her mentor for 2 years. He had finished his trials right at 12, quicker than the majority of anyone on the planet, and she felt lucky to have him. He kept his dark hair pulled back into a ponytail, despite having a scar behind his ear that ran down his neck. Through the years, Rayla wondered why he chose not to hide that, especially as he never seemed to want to cut his hair. Rayla was very particular about her appearance, going as far as to smear mud-based paste over the birthmark on her left arm. The paste would harden and look like her skin, capable of covering any blemish that she might have. There's a reason, Kai told her when she finally got the courage to ask him about the scar. But not what you might think. Tell me what you think, Rayla. She thought for a moment, chewing on her cheek. To remind everyone of your strength, of how fast you passed the trials? He shook his head. To remind everyone of how dangerous it can be, and to remind them to take it seriously. This time, Rayla knew that she didn't need to tell him what had happened below at the temple. She knew that he had seen everything on the screen inside his ship, and she hated that she couldn't do anything without everyone's eyes on her. She walked past him without saying anything and made her way onto his ship. The Scarlet Shadow, he called it, was every pilot's dream on her planet. A roomy interior, smooth controls, and a top-of-the-line engine that could only be found in the newest models. Kai had received the ship from his father, a gift for completing the trial so soon, but he never bragged. Instead, he spent most of his time searching for spare parts to upgrade other ships, often refusing payment as a way of giving back to his people. He had even gone as far as removing some of the parts on his own ship, parts that he didn't think he needed, to help repair other ships and land speeders that had stopped flying. She sat in the co-pilot's chair, watching Kai out of the corner of her eye as she rubbed her throat that had begun to throb. He didn't say anything as he sat down, buckled up, and started the ship to take her to the post-trial meeting. The meetings were mandatory and always followed the attempt. Above them was their home city, Kalkar, miles away from the trees and fog and miles away from the natural surface of Krip, much closer to the sky with the twin moons. Need to be smarter, Rayla. It's not always about the blood, he said. She felt something flutter in her stomach when he talked to her. Whether embarrassment or anger or something else, she didn't give it any attention and instead chose to watch through the window while he lifted the ship off the ground. She could see the Lumies constellation watching over her in the sky, the gentle beast's luminescent fur spread across its giant body. No one had seen these creatures in over a century, but Rayla had heard rumors through the years that a pack of them still lived deep in the Monchek caves in the north sector of the underlevels, on the surface. The entrance to the small caves was only big enough for a child, and even then, no child was brave enough to squeeze themselves in. Even when people were still allowed down there, the constant training for the trials wasn't enough to give them confidence against the rumors of what, or who, was lurking in the caves with the Lumi. It became an urban legend of sorts. "Rayla, you're gonna pass. I know you have it in you. Trust me," he said. She turned to look at him and saw him smiling at her as he pushed upwards on the ship controls. She felt the feeling in her stomach again and quickly turned her head back towards the window, letting her hair fall over her eyes. She wanted to pass, not just because of the threat of exile should she fail. She also wanted to defend her home and to be like Kai, capable of proving herself to everyone else. But more than anything, she wanted to prove to her father that she wouldn't be sent away to the other side of the planet and that he wouldn't lose his daughter forever. She watched as the world zoomed by. The beach got bigger, the trees got smaller, and the ground was harder to see. Without warning, Kai pushed left on the controls, bringing the ship even closer to the sky. She clutched her stomach at the sudden shift. He laughed as he took them off course, passing the tops of even the tallest trees. She looked out the window again. Tiny birds, tiny specks, probably big when seen closer, nested on tree branches, and she could see a great deal more of the ocean. The foam washed over the waves and the green sparkled under the moons. "What are you doing? We're supposed to be meeting with my superior," she tried to say. "Those people can wait," he said. "This is much more important." He turned the ship again to head east directly over the water. Rayla saw less and less of the forest, and before she knew it, she could only see water, like a stranded castaway floating on a piece of wood in the middle of the ocean. "Look up," he said. Above her, she saw a clear view of the Loomies constellation, but farther down, she could see a patch of stars that she hadn't seen before. She turned her head, trying to make sense of the shape, but she couldn't figure out what it was. He put his hands on her head and pushed it the other way, and as she closed her eyes just a little, she saw what he saw. A new constellation. A hand reaching out to her, its fingers curled as if ready to hold her hand. "The hand above the heavens, it's always covering us, and it's covering you too. Isn't it beautiful?" he asked. She felt a little better. He knew how to pull her out of her head, even when she didn't want him to. She watched the constellation in silence, and Kai didn't try to say anything else after that. After a few minutes, he turned the ship back towards the original path. She looked down at her own hand, sitting in her lap, and she saw that the specks of blood from before had dried.
It was a while when you're reading the prologue, I had your whole novel flash in my head, the whole thing. It was like, shh. It just, wow, those revisions too, just beautiful, beautiful. So, thanks. All right, next up tonight, there's 3 more to go. We have Ben Watson, and this is really just a kind of a love note to Ben. So it will only be our joke here. Okay, so first, I know Ben is going to miss my rambling cross-eyed write-ups and my layers of metaphor, often mixed layers of metaphor. What stuns me about Ben's writing is his execution. His plans manifest, he follows a plan, the novels work, he sees, he is a seer, he turns ideas into stories. He completed 2 novels here, 2 novels that either one could have been his thesis, and had to decide which one to do. Both are damn good books. Ben, in his writing, executes, implements, accomplishes, completes, fulfills, performs, carries out, realizes, effectuates, achieves, and brings about. This makes it sound like his work won't be artful, but Ben bends those chords, is able to get something out of his sentences, his characters, his plots that resonate. In the first Form of Theory class, I talked about how, together, I talked about spinning plates, and Ben is a master of spinning all his plates all at once, and maybe even your plates whirl. Ben Watson.
So I'm actually not going to be reading from my thesis. I'm not super fond of doing excerpts. Instead, I'm going to be reading a short piece that I feel like has become essentially iconic of me as a writer in this program. It is entitled The Sexy Lamp. Normally, when Bill Stewart picked up his wife from her occult lessons at the antique shop, she'd be waiting by the door for him, a bit disheveled but ready to go. This time it was a pudgy store clerk with a nervous disposition that reminded Bill of a grade schooler who'd been caught trying to steal money from his mom's purse. See, we were doing the usual occult stuff, and basically there was a demon monster thing, and well, it's not a great idea to offend one of those things when you're doing the occult stuff, the clerk said. Bill rubbed his temple, looking around the dimly lit store. He wished they'd turn on some of the piddly light fixtures the place was selling to brighten things up a scotch. It was downright dreary, dust-scented, splintery wooden shelves adorned with cracked, tattered keepsakes. Bill would never understand why his wife insisted on attending occult lessons in this drab place 3 nights a week, but he let the sweet little dear have her hobbies regardless. I'm sorry, I'm still confused, Bill said, looking around the aisle of beat-up tchotchkes. What exactly happened? Well, see, the store clerk said, coughing, we were doing an occult thing, standard occult practices with the chanting and the waving and the scratching. Bill held up his hand. Scratching, he asked. The store clerk blinked. Right, scratching. You scratch the table. Demon monsters like the noise it makes. Bill exhaled. I'm sorry, I've been worried my wife might have done something indecent. Please go on. Well, anyway, we were chanting and scratching up a storm, and that's when one of those demon monsters appeared, and then, well, you and I both know how Jen loves to make those little acerbic comments. That she does, Bill agreed, giving a hearty laugh. She's such a scamp, isn't she? Did she say something to... Sorry, what was the demon monster's name? Oh, right, his name. It was Damien, the store clerk said. Bill frowned. Damien the demon. The clerk nodded. Yes, and that was exactly what Jen commented on. And, well, it's just not a great idea to make fun of a demon monster's name. Damien was quite displeased. I see, Bill said, swallowing. Dear me, this doesn't sound like good news, and after the dreadful day at work I've had, too. He sighed, his shoulders slumping at the motion. I don't suppose I could trouble you for a glass of water. Oh, I've got a few bottles around the counter, if that'll work, the clerk offered. Bill groaned. I suppose now's not the time to worry about the impending death of our planet through people's irresponsible, wasteful habits. The clerk blinked a few times at Bill, his muddy eyes barely visible underneath his brown bangs. Right, he said. He reached under the counter and handed Bill a small water bottle that crinkled as Bill gripped it. Generic brand, too, he muttered, killing the planet for disgusting water. What a lose-lose situation. Bill took a few sips. He was tempted to spit the lukewarm swill out, but he didn't want to be rude. Anyway, as I was saying, Jen... Oh, yes, of course, I'd nearly forgotten. Do go on, Bill said in his most helpful tone. Well, there's no easy way to say this, Mr. Stewart, but your wife's now a lamp. Bill's brow pinched. A lamp. Is that some kind of metaphor for... No, it's pretty literal. The demon monster did some demon monster stuff, and now she's a lamp. Bill shook his head, his face flushed. He was willing to humor his wife and all the occult things, but he'd always known it was a load of hogwash. People didn't just turn into lamps. This was the 21st century, for goodness sake. He turned his head away from the clerk, refusing to look the man in the eye. Then his mouth popped open into a small O as he saw her. It was the most beautiful lamp he'd ever seen. Made of shiny brass, it depicted a slender woman in a sundress. The metallic frills of the fabric elevated as if being carried by a gentle gust. Her right hand was raised to her mouth, hiding most of a small smile as if she'd heard the most delightful joke, and her left hand was outstretched as if she were waiting for some dashing gentleman to take it. The light bulb, which protruded from her head, was covered by a lampshade made to look like a wide-rimmed bonnet. Seeing this magnificent specimen, Bill instantly knew it must be his wife. Dearest, Bill shouted, causing a few of the other store patrons to stare. He leapt from his chair, knocking over the thing with a loud bang, and rushed over to her, wrapped her arms around her petite shoulders. Oh, you poor little thing, it's all right. Bill is here for you now. The store clerk approached, baffled. That's not... Bill attempted to flip the small switch in her back, but she didn't turn on. Why isn't she plugged in? Bill demanded. Are you trying to kill the poor thing? Well, no, it's just that it's not. Bill let out a horrified gasp as he looked at the cord and saw the price tag hanging off her delicate bronze ankle. You're selling my wife? He demanded. A small clump of customers had gathered at this point, and this sent a series of shocked gasps through the crowd. For $620? Bill almost fainted as he saw another tag, this one stuck to a beautifully shiny big toe. And she's half off? You vile fiend! The store clerk looked flabbergasted at this point. He had this awkward expression, mostly disbelief, but the corner of his mouth were slightly upturned as if this were all some great big joke. Well, Bill Stewart was not amused. With one smooth motion, Bill lifted up the beautiful lamp in his arms and started stomping out of the store. "Wait," the clerk called out. "That's not good day, sir," Bill shouted at the top of his lungs as he carried the heavy brown bronze lamp out into the parking lot, drowning out the clerk's drivel. "Good day." Bill laid the lamp gently across his back seat, taking a second to caress her cold, smooth face. "There, there, dearest," he said as he hopped into the driver's seat. Through the glass windows, Bill saw the clerk trying to make his way out the door, but the crowd of people inside was holding him back, shouting questions about whether he was running some kind of human trafficking ring. Bill's red Mercedes gave a smooth ride as he sped away from the dingy store toward the center of town. Bill couldn't help but steal glances back at the beautiful specimen on his backseat as he drove. Even after being turned into a lamp, she was such an exquisite creature. Bill parked in the reserve space in the underground lot. He was wheezing a bit as he climbed the slight incline out of the parking garage. He was not a man accustomed to carrying much of anything, let alone a full-length bronze lamp, but he made do. "Looks heavy," the front desk clerk commented as Bill trudged his way across the granite floor. "Need a hand with it?" "How dare you," Bill huffed, trying too tired to manage a proper shout. "She is not heavy. She's in perfect shape, thank you very much." The front desk clerk stared at Bill for a moment, then nodded. "Apologies. Enjoy your night, Mr. Stewart." Bill was about to retort, but in losing his focus, he almost dropped her. Bill managed to catch her by her thighs before her dainty ankles hit the floor. "Sorry, dearest," he added, devoting all of his attention to carrying the masterpiece home. Then came the crucial question, where to put her? Of course, a spot in the corner of the kitchen was the obvious choice. He'd thought for ages it was a bit dark and dreary there, so the space could do with a bit of light. But then Bill shook his head at the notion a marvelous creature such as this lamp deserved to be displayed. He concluded that the TV was obviously superfluous. Who would want to watch that drab old screen when they could instead stare at her? After giving her bronze body and white bonnet lampshade a strong scrub, Bill gently placed her in the center of the room. Sparkling and shining after a thorough clean, the lamp glittered in its own light. Bill quickly realized that admiring it would be an all-evening affair, so he poured himself a glass of Merlot and reclined on the couch. "You're looking particularly radiant tonight, my dear," Bill said, raising his glass. "Just an absolute vision of feminine grace. I dare say you're the most beautiful woman lamp I've ever seen, my lovely darling." Bill continued the compliments of the lamp, which became less and less sensical as he worked his way through a fifth and then sixth glass of wine. "So shiny you are. Shiny, shiny," he said, tipping a non-existent hat. He was always more of a happy drunk than an angry one, though occasionally he'd get a touch sentimental too. His happy praise devolved into blubbering about his poor, poor wife and the awful thing that that old demon monster, was his name David, Daniel, something like that, had done to her. "How cruel," he said, "how tragic." Somewhere between glasses 10 and 12, the phone rang, causing Bill to choke on his vintage, the stuff burning his nose as he coughed it up. He took a moment to compose himself, then answered the phone with a tone that he thought had no detectable vocal slur. "Stewart residence, to whom am I speaking? To me?" he asked. Then he frowned, sure that there was something wrong with that sentence, but unable to put his finger on it. "Bill," it was the audacious store clerk from before. "Listen, this is very important. You grabbed the wrong—" "No, you listen here, you bad person," Bill shouted. "I don't know where you get off trying to sell my thing like she's a common wife." Bill frowned and corrected. "Wife like she's a common wife." "But it isn't yours," the clerk said. "If you just listen, I'm trying to tell you, you grabbed the wrong—" "No, you're wrong," Bill shouted in reply. "Good day." Bill slammed the phone onto the table, missing the receiver entirely. After a moment, he picked it up and tried again, gentler this time. It would not do to hurt his lovely varnished side table. The phone rang a few more times before Bill finally blocked the number. He turned back to the lamp. "You're the only one I need, my sweet dear." Bill clutched the cold, dainty hand of his own, gently caressing the fingertips. And that's when the light went out. Her lampshade, beautifully illuminated only seconds before, went out with an ominous click. Bill blinked a few times, then flipped the switch on her back on and off. Nothing. Bill felt panic rising in his throat. "Dearest," he begged, clutching her shoulders. "No, no, 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 my sweet dear, speak to me, please." He clutched her bronze waist, crying in dismay. He grabbed her cord and shoved it in a new outlet as if praying the power, and not the beautiful creature, was faulty. But no, her smooth skin stayed depressingly dull as if all the life had been sucked out of her. Bill sniffed, looking at the lifeless lamp, more slate gray than bronze in the dim evening light. He felt like he was looking at a corpse, and even in death, she deserved dignity, Bill thought. Bill pulled the cord from the wall and then held her sideways in his arms, sniffling as he marched her to the couch. He felt his throat swell up as he began to sing softly. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me. The lamp was heavy enough that when mixed with Bill's already shaky breath control, the singing devolved into sort of musical panting as he laid the lamp to rest on the couch. Amidst Bill's total emotional breakdown, he heard a thumping knock on the varnish door. Not now, can't you see it's all over, Bill cried in dismay. But the knocking was insistent. Bill let out a despondent sigh, deciding that his obviously deceased wife would have wanted him to see to his guest even at a time like this. Bill crawled to the entryway and pulled the door open, revealing a store clerk from before. The disgruntled, scruffy man was holding a plain table lamp under his arms. What's this? Bill asked, his voice bitterly disdainful. Come to mock me. Don't you see she's dead? Bill thrust his arm now at the lightless lamp form on his living room couch. The store clerk blinked a few times. You mean the light bulb stopped working? He said. No, you callous knave, don't you see her light has gone out? The clerk frowned. It's just a lamp, he said slowly. You could just replace the light bulb. Replace the light bulb? Why, that's her soul. It's my wife. I would never dream of mutilating her in such a barbaric way. How dare you? Mr. Stewart, the store clerk shouted, instantly silencing the blubbering man. That is not your wife. This... The man gestured to a little utilitarian lamp he was carrying under his arm. Is your wife? You grabbed the wrong lamp. Bill stood there stunned. You're telling me she's... He stared at the dinky little lamp, a gray plastic number he could have picked up for about $10 at a supermarket, then looked back at the gorgeous lamp in the center of the room. Yes, wrong lamp, the clerk repeated slowly like he was talking to a small child. The clerk set the lamp down on the floor, grumbling under his breath. And you didn't plug her in? Bill asked faintly. Won't she die without electricity? For the love of all that's holy, it's just a... The clerk sighed. No, Mr. Stewart. And if the light bulb goes out, just change it. It'll be fine. Oh, yes, I see. Dear me. Bill was feeling quite faint, so he slunk over to the recliner. The clerk stepped behind the lamp, pulling off her burial blanket, and began lifting her upright. Just what do you think you're doing? Bill asked. Taking back the lamp that you stole from my store, the clerk replied. Bill spluttered indignantly, but couldn't come up with any real argument against the assertion. But as he saw the clerk sling the bronze masterpiece over his shoulder, he felt his heart flutter. Wait, Bill said. The clerk huffed and laid the lamp on the ground. Yes? Well, it's just, you see, Bill frowned, looking at the beautiful lamp. Well, I already redecorated around the new lamp, you see, and it's hard to explain these things to one's social circle. It's $625, the clerk said, no traces of patience left in his tone. Bill hesitated. I seem to recall there being a half-off sign on it. The clerk gave Bill a blank look and tilted the lamp up as if to carry it away. Right, $620, Bill said. I'll write you a check now. Bill pulled out his checkbook. As he was filling out the check, he paused. Goodness me, what was your name again? The clerk just snatched the blank check out of his hands and stomped out the door. Bill stood in the center of the room for a few moments, then looked down at his lamps. He sighed and brought the small lamp over to the darker corner spot of the kitchen. As he plugged it in, you could almost feel an air of accusation from it. What? Bill said, looking down at the small lamp. Do you think are you accusing me of... His face went red and he spluttered. Don't be ridiculous. She was nothing to me. I'd never dream of being unfaithful to you with that floozy, I swear it. She's only here for appearances, nothing more, I tell you. Besides, it's not my fault you went and got yourself turned into such a plain-looking lamp. Bill looked at the lamp for a few moments and he thought he saw it shiver slightly like she was crying. Instantly, the rage vanished. Oh, no, dearest, don't cry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it, I promise. Bill clubbed the lampshade in his hands, gently clutching the cheap plastic. Oh, you know I can't stand arguing, my sweet dear. Come on, let's put this nasty business behind us. We'll get you plugged in somewhere nice and it'll be all better. You'll see. Bill gave a sidelong glance at the other lamp, a glance which he was certain the little lamp noticed. He hesitated. And I'll put it, somewhere hidden in the background. She's just decoration, I swear it. Bill hesitated, feeling a bit of accusation come off the table lamp. Oh, don't start this again. Must it always be this way with you? Nothing happened. Why do you have to be like this? Bill paused as the lamp kept quiet. Oh, yes, very mature, giving me the silent treatment. Well, two can play at that game. You won't hear another word out of me. Bill stomped over to the wine cabinet. And let me tell you, you'll be the one suffering, not me. I can tell you that much. Bill poured himself a glass, then glanced over at the little lamp once more. I mean it, he said. Not another peep out of me. Not one. While Bill was busy arguing with his lamps, the store clerk made his way to the parking lot a few blocks down. He climbed into the passenger seat of an aqua blue convertible. I told you he'd like that god-awful thing, the woman in the driver's seat said. He's always had such garish taste. The clerk sighed. We're gonna tell him eventually, right, Jen? The woman just rolled her eyes at him as she drove away. Thank you.
That was fantastic. I'm glad we got to revisit that again. And I'll miss my name twin. Okay. 6 weeks ago, when we were all out in LA for the AWP conference, I introduced Meilyn Wood for her reading at a very special, unique restaurant in West Hollywood. And I joked that Meilyn was doing something awful, that she was going to graduate and leave us. What we didn't know at that time was that she would be offered McNeese's 1-year post-MFA instructorship of excellence. And while the graduating part is true, she isn't leaving us just yet after all. I had titled Meilyn's thesis defense, "The Crown is Heavy, Darling," which is a nod to our shared love of pop culture and the glam that Meilyn loves to highlight in her writing. So this evening, to introduce her, I'm just going to complete this tagline fully and properly as befits her new position. I will not do a British accent. The crown is heavy, darling, so just leave it where it belongs. We're delighted we get to spend another year with her as a friend and a colleague. Everybody, please welcome Meilyn Woods.
Can y'all hear me? All right. Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you to everyone who came out to see me. So this is a short story from my second year that I revised for my thesis. It's called Video Vixens. It didn't take much for Mariah to convince them that it was legit, and before they knew it, they were boarding a plane to Miami. When the attendant scanned Dominique's boarding pass, she felt her stomach drop to her knees. She had told her mom a week before that she was going on a girls' trip for spring break, but she had failed to mention that they were getting flown out by Mariah's somewhat sketchy acquaintance, a rapper named Jay Sauer. Mariah was the hustler of the group. While the rest of them were off seeking higher education, she was selling feed pics and posting sponsored content for brands on social media. College wasn't her thing. She tried for a few semesters, but she was a wannabe socialite and had amassed millions of followers for just being herself. She was gorgeous, and they often joked that she could earn their measly salary with one beach selfie and no degree. Like all her male friends, she met Jay Sauer online. He had messaged her, hoping that she'd star in his music video. It was a weekend trip, and she agreed under the pretext that she could invite some of her friends along. Friends was a vague word. The two girls traveling with them were some of Mariah's old college friends who Dom knew vaguely. But Dom and Mariah had been friends since high school. She remembered when Mariah wanted to be a pediatrician, but at 13, she was approached by a man in the mall who told her that she could be a model. Since then, she had made several attempts to break into the industry. She had been chewed up and spit out many times, but she always managed to get up. "What's the matter, Dom?" Mariah asked as they took their seats. "First class not up to your standards?" First class was just like in the movies. Dom settled into a cushy chair and let it swallow her as champagne flowed freely between the four girls. Their companions, Amani and London, were also aspiring models looking for their big break. Mariah offered Dom a spot as well, but she didn't know if she was ready for Video Vixen to be on her resume. However, she had made a promise to herself that she would take chances this year. After all, she was a senior bio major, and she had never taken a step out of line. Just the thought of drinking when she had finals to prep for made her heart skip a beat. However, the worry was soon replaced with a light buzz. When they landed, they were immediately ushered to an Uber. Mariah shouted an unknown address to the driver, and he listened, transporting them to an unknown world. Miami was all colors. Everything was neon and reflective, so much so that it burned Dominique's eyes when she looked too closely. "Do you even know where we're going?" she asked Mariah, who was glued to her phone. "Jay's manager told me we'd be staying on set." The set in question was a white 2-story mansion somewhere in the suburbs. The lawn was a lush green offset by a shining blue swimming pool. They were one of the many Ubers parked outside, each housing a different set of girls. They unfolded into the yard like circus clowns, each with a rolling suitcase. "I guess we aren't that special," said Amani, scouting the competition. And she was right. Each girl was a copy and paste of the other. Half of their body weights were made up of hair extensions and silicone, and they had already begun snapping selfies and recording videos of their glorious home away from home. Dominique became hyper-aware of her own body in comparison. She had been described by most guys as thick, but now she felt every roll on her body. Why hadn't she hit the gym more or got a spray tan before the trip? Thankfully, the doors to the mansion opened before she could spiral. Out came 24 women in hot pink string bikinis, each carrying serving trays of pina coladas. "Welcome to Casa de Sour," they said in robotic unison. This caused a frenzy among the women, each one running to grab their free drink. The inside of the house was just as luxurious. Plush white furniture, crystal chandeliers, fur rugs with gold accents. Despite the stark color scheme, greenery invaded every corner of the mansion, giving it a weird, homey feel. What made it weirder was the camera crew setting up. They were the only men in sight, all dressed in black. One guy with a clipboard approached them. "It's a pleasure to meet you, ladies," he said. "On behalf of Mr. Sauer, I hope you enjoy the refreshments provided by his staff. Today's mission is going to be getting some candid shots, so act natural and be beautiful, okay?" "What's he talking about?" said Dominique. "Action," he screamed. Before she could get an answer, music was already playing, and the girls began to dance to Jay Sauer's music. They all seemed to have just practiced the choreography because they moved like a well-oiled machine, and Dominique was the piece that needed to be replaced. They had left their luggage with the driver, who had left them here with no plan in sight. Dominique immediately began to sweat. Before she could run outside to retreat, she followed Mariah's lead when she grabbed her hands to dance. Dominique woke the next morning to find herself in bed with a stranger. One of the cameramen from the night before was sprawled in her bed, shirtless and snoring. Failing to remember how she even got there, she jolted out of bed, only to find London passed out on the bathroom floor. She wore a black t-shirt with white letters that spelled crew across the back. Luckily, this wasn't Dom's first time dealing with a drunk friend, so she checked her pulse to make sure she was breathing before dragging her to bed. Now the bathroom was free for her to purge herself of the night before. After her episode, she took a shower, letting the warm water run over her. The bathroom was fully stocked with expensive products, so she scrubbed herself with sugars and salts before smothering herself in floral lotions. Wrapping herself in a plush towel, she found her phone and decided to explore. As Dominique walked through the hallway, the night began to replay. She remembered the way the cameras hovered around them as they danced to Jay Sauer's single, No Sacrifices, and how Mariah did her best to position them adequately to get the best angles. And though it was all for show, there was this weird line between what was real and what was not. These women, who were once strangers, were now her friends. She remembered the director shouting nonsensical phrases at them like, "More hair, more face, and work it." Now Dominique stepped cautiously over broken glass and solo cups. She peered through each cracked bedroom door. Inside, some were collections of tangled limbs, while others were being emptied by the cleaning staff, which she nodded at politely when she came across them. Downstairs had been cleaned so well you wouldn't have thought there was a house party the night before. Instead, there was a decadent breakfast spread. The table was overflowing with fruits and pastries, clotted creams and jams. Deli meats and a fresh caprese salad were dressed beautifully on fine crystal plates. All of it looked untouched. Her phone vibrated. It was her mother. "How's everything?" she asked. Dominique walked to the nearest window, sending her mother a picture of the amazing view. From the window, she could see Mariah and Amani working out by the pool. When she went outside, they were in the middle of a rigorous ab routine. "Look, you decided to wake up," said Mariah, toweling herself off. "Did you enjoy your threesome with London?" Amani joked. "Don't believe a word she says," said Mariah, throwing her suede towel at her friend. "London is notorious for sleeping with cameramen. She thinks he'll land her more screen time in final edits." "Where did you guys sleep?" asked Dominique, who wasn't in the laughing mood. "Also, where the hell is our luggage, and what the fuck are we going to do about the cameraman in our bed?" "Chill," said Mariah. "They brought our luggage up this morning. I have all the bags in my room. And don't worry about the cameraman or London. This business is all about who's up and who's ready. Now let's get dressed because they're going to start filming soon." Mariah was right. As if on cue, girls were flooding the bathrooms, stuffing their bras, and applying lip gloss. Towards the end, the bathroom smelled like burnt hair and aerosols. As Dominique was powdering her face, she could hear the director yelling at them to get downstairs. She had been informed today was the day the pool scene would be filmed, and she let out a yawn. "Take one," said Mariah. She presented her with a bottle of tiny blue pills. In her almost 4 years of college, Dominique had been quite familiar with uppers, and she took one without thinking. "Good idea," said Imani, taking one before the three of them headed downstairs. Jay Sauer was as gaudy and audacious as his home. He was draped in diamonds from his teeth to his shoes, and he wore his hair in cornrows the ladies ran their bony fingers through. Mariah and Imani were as entranced as the rest, snaking up and down his body like centipedes as he lip-synced his lyrics with sheer and utter confidence. Dominique grazed the breakfast table, letting the now heightened flavors melt on her tongue. Such an ostentatious display would usually make her skin crawl, but there was something infectious about it as she watched from behind the camera. It wasn't long before art and life melted together. Though the director had yelled cut, the party continued. The camera never stopped, only drifted into the background, ever present and all-knowing. The mansion seemed to expand in order to contain the multitude of people who flooded through its threshold bearing gifts. Food, drink, and substances were passed around, and Dominique partook in all of it because she had decided that today she didn't care about consequences. However, she knew well enough that she should give her mother a status report. It was only right, and it would settle her conscience. She journeyed to find the nearest bathroom, and she put her ear to a cracked door. "Anyone in here?" she asked. There was some shuffling around, and soon Jay Sauer emerged in the doorway. "Are you looking to join the party?" he slurred. Behind him, she could see Mariah sitting on the bathroom floor with her head in her lap. "Mariah," Dominique said, rushing to her friend's aid, "are you okay?" She was crying and simply motioned for her friend to shut the door. Jay Sauer had moved on to the next girl, a redhead with fake boobs. Dominique shut the door and ran some paper towels under cool water before pressing them to the back of Mariah's neck. "Did he do something to you?" she asked hurriedly. "Should I call someone?" "No," said Mariah angrily. "I wouldn't let him. I just wanted a chance to talk to him, you know? I thought I could pitch myself." "Well, maybe you can try again tomorrow when we're not all drunk," said Dom. She let her friend cry in her arms, and it reminded her of the time when they were in high school and Mariah came to her crying because she had been dropped from a JCPenney's ad. They had promised to make her a star. By now, the uppers had run their course, and the girls were left listening to the echo of the party outside the bathroom walls. After coming to her senses, Mariah turned to her friend. "Do you want to get out of here for a while?" It didn't take long for them to stumble upon a tattoo shop. Inside was jet black, and neon lights were the only thing used to highlight the multiple designs that plastered the walls. They settled on 2 flamingos, and Mariah held Dominique's hand as she sat in the chair. Tomorrow they'd be on their way home, and she knew what lay on the other side: finals, graduation, and the real world. But she let those thoughts fade away as she braced herself for the needle. Thank you.
To introduce our final reader of the night, Katelynn Adrian, I'd like to show a video that she produced for our final workshop. I'm not going to, but I would really like to. Perhaps she and Bob can do a recreation at the party. I always have some variation of show and tell in my graduate fiction class, and this semester I asked the students to do something outside of their comfort zone and to report back on that. Katelynn, who in this workshop we all agreed epitomizes the word unflappable, said she truly couldn't think of much that makes her uncomfortable. And that makes sense to me. Katelynn embraces life fully and is scared of nothing. Her writing is colorful, and she is colorful inside and out. And it was no surprise this morning to see that she had decorated her graduation cap with teeny little square, like disco ball mirror tiles. And when we were watching, in fact, it sits in the back, so we're watching the Jumbotron, they would pan out over the whole audience, and it would only take me 1 second to find Katelynn. Light was bouncing off of it. Katelynn is shining as usual. Katelynn's tagline for this evening is, "If you can't take my sparkle, then stay off my rainbow." Everyone, please welcome our final reader of the night, Katelynn, Adrian.
I'm reading a collection of short stories, and they don't relate in any way other than I wrote them. So, we're starting with 10 meters down. I can tell who won't jump in an instant. Sometimes it's the sweaty palms that they wipe on their swim trunks. Other times it's the nervous shuffle they do once they reach the top. It doesn't matter that I'm waiting for them with outstretched arms, or that I'm cheering them on and waving at them as hard as I can. It doesn't matter that I promise to be soft, to be gentle, that I promise I'm closer than they think. The confidence they had climbing up dissipates the moment they look down and realize just how far apart we've become. For so many of them, 10 meters down becomes too real, too far, too dangerous. My favorites are the ones that want to soar. I envy their ability to reach heights I can only dream of reaching. They look at me with a different kind of dread. They don't fear meeting me. They fear the finality that comes with reaching me. They are Icaruses by choice. They crave that thrilling pit of your stomach twisting and turning. They crave that weightlessness, and they hate that they'll never be able to stay there floating in the sky. This is X Leather. I sat in the living room and watched TV while he put his stuff in the trunk. After the light box was loaded, he stopped in front of the TV and faced me. Next to him was a rolling suitcase I got him for his birthday. Just a week ago, it held some other girl's clothes, crotchless negligees and lacy panties with matching bras he claimed came from someone else, someone whose bag he must have accidentally picked up off the carousel, someone that just so happened to have the same kind of suitcase with the same luggage tag with the same initials on it as his. If you find anything else that's mine, let me know, and I'll come pick it up, he said. I kept my eyes centered, watching his hands twirl around. They glided over each other as he tried to contain his anxiety in them. It made me sick, especially his nails. They were so shiny they looked wet. Even his clothes looked damp. A silk shirt like water and oily leather pants. It was the same outfit he wore on our first date. I had complimented his ability to pull off mixing fabrics so well. He looked good then, dry. The low lighting of whatever the name of that hole-in-the-wall restaurant was had reflected off of his clothes with an angelic glow, giving his once callus-covered hands and thick beard this I'm the rugged member of a boy band look. Now he looked like a dolphin out of water, slick, slimy, and unsure what to do with himself. What, like another pair of panties that aren't mine? I allowed myself a quick glance at his now clean-shaven face to see his reaction. He smashed his lips together to form a straight line and sighed. Whatever, he said. I couldn't help but laugh when he slammed the door behind him. Who is he to pout and act hurt and sad? I laughed so hard I sounded like a melting witch, just wheezes and cackles. My sides pinched, and I had to sit up straight to try and give my diaphragm more space. Where does he get the audacity to treat me like I'm the bad guy? Those leather pants? This is Crosswalk. Today, everything was white and loud. Machines pulsed and tubes trailed from me. This will help with the pain, a nurse told me as she hung up a bag of some kind of fluid medication I couldn't pronounce. My only response was a grunt and a turn of my head. Your family came by while you were sleeping. They said they'll be back again tomorrow, though. She left my room. Mom cried the whole visit. Dad tried consoling her, but when that didn't work, he started telling me about the insurance claim. 2 semesters of tuition would be covered for sure, since I was going to be missing a lot of school. But it looked like they might be able to get all my students' loans paid off. We're lucky your sister is always on that phone of hers. She got a picture of their license plate. My little sister sat in the corner with her headphones in, doing God knows what on her phone while she snapped gum between her teeth. I wondered what it would take to get her up to look up this time. Yesterday, she had that same attitude. Nonchalant, but still better than everyone else. I was starting to think her body was fused to that pose, headphones in, head down. Even when I was running after her, screaming for her, she ignored me. She didn't look up for the car horn or the screeching brakes. She didn't look up until she felt my hand against her back. In one motion, she yanked an earbud out and turned to look at me, but she was already falling. She landed on the sidewalk with a hey as a BMW convertible ran the red light.
The car's side mirror clipped my hip and sent me flying, throwing me against the traffic pole. Wait, the pre-recorded crosswalk man demanded as my back hit the button. Things cracked and popped that I had never cracked or popped before. Hillary, Hillary, Lindsay hovered above me, clearly scared to touch me. I imagined my mangled body propped up against the traffic pole like a discarded rag doll. I watched the sky change from day to night as my vision blurred and turned into star-filled darkness. They got it wrong with the flesh is bread thing. I don't know who decided flesh was synonymous with bread. It's definitely not. His flesh is made flesh again through the flesh of bovines. He lives in meat so soft that swallowing is sacrilegious because it would destroy his resurrected body. He lives in the smoky remnants of wood chips and grill marks that spread across your taste buds in a steady river of juices. He lives in steaks so tender that they melt on your tongue, becoming one pink, salivating piece of flesh the way he intended. They were right about the blood as wine, though. He's a Cabernet. And this is the last one. It's ravioli insides. When she held me in her tiny palm, me over everyone else, I felt special. I belonged to her, and I would do anything to stay with her. She put me in her cart, but her mother stopped her. Not tonight, sweetie. You've had chef every night this week, her mother said. She looked at me with saucer-sized eyes and caressed my aluminum face before putting me back on the shelf. But I love chef, she said as she walked away. As soon as they rounded the corner, I flung myself off the shelf and hit the ground rolling. I headed for the door, sweeping the supermarket floor more than any of the teenagers in those ugly vests ever had. I reached the threshold where tile meets carpet, but my lack of height prevented the automatic door from registering my presence. I slammed myself into it over and over, metals clanking together, ringing and echoing through the supermarket. A shadow fell over me, and I noticed a young man hovering above me. I rolled myself towards the door slowly, hoping he would understand what I needed him to do. He leaned forward, putting one foot on the carpet and triggering the door. I launched myself through the gates of freedom. It was a dizzying journey. It took me 3 wrong exits and almost getting hit by an 18-wheeler before I was no longer surrounded by 3-lane traffic going at vehicularly homicidal speeds. With each roll, more houses with fences and families appeared until I was finally rolling through a fence and into my girl's backyard. I hopped over an unraveled hose, maneuvered a toy slide to line up with their doggy door, and launched myself over the steps and through the plastic flap that reminded me of the day I got off the truck and home to the supermarket shelf. I rolled right up to my sweet girl, stopping gently at her feet. My girl smiled and held me up. "What do you want for dinner?" her mother asked from the other room. I could hear rustling like she was still emptying the grocery bags from only a moment ago when she forced my girl to abandon me at the store. My girl brought me to her mother. "Where did you get this?" Her mother took me from her. "Just showed up. Can we have it for dinner?" "Fine, at least it's easy." She turned away from my girl, gripping me tightly, much more tightly than the way my girl had held me. My girl held me in a soft palm, a loving palm. Her mother held me in a dry palm, an aggressive palm. She held me like I was going to slip out of her fingers and then slammed me against something right before letting me go. I felt a sharp pain in my head and nothing under my feet. I tried to wiggle away, but something held me in place. Then I began to spin. Cold air hit my head, and I felt it being sliced open. The spinning stopped with a click, and my girl's mother yanked me from the contraption. She pulled my scalp back and flipped me upside down. Everything inside of me spilled into a pot. Noodles and intestines, brains and beef. My girl's mother slapped and shook me to make sure every last drop of my essence was in that pot. She ran a finger around the inside of my aluminum skin, collecting the last dribbles of my soul before licking my redness off her finger with a slurp. I struggled to look at my girl. She was smiling like she enjoyed this. "Throw this away from me," my girl's mother said, handing my shell of a self to her. My girl skipped across the kitchen and opened a large wooden bin. Inside was a trash can stained red from the bloodied sauce of my brethren. My girl dropped me on top of the mass grave, a sinister smile on her face. "Boy, this stuff is good," she said as she closed the bin. Thank you.
Well, that's it. Congratulations, everyone. Maybe one more. impromptu reading. Really nice. Final test now. All right, so we're gonna bring food out. There's jambalaya, bread pudding, other stuff, and then there is, this is an interesting mix, there is Thai, vegan, tofu as well, and gluten-free. So there's an interesting mix together for all of you. All right, thanks so much for coming. Talk to us if you need that information. Don't miss the party. Yeah, we gotta do. Oh yeah, we're gonna. All right, MFA people, we have to get the photos. Let's do it now so we don't have to do it later. Okay, how's everyone? I think everyone, grads, then everyone, and then second years, then first years, then first, second, and third years. Like, no, I just swear. And, someone take this away from me, please.
Thank you. I see we decided to read the same piece, basically.